Hi. In this video, I'm going to show you a couple of other scenarios, a couple other development scenarios, just to give you a sense of how powerful this basic development panel can be. So oftentimes when we bring an image in, especially a raw file like this one, when we first look at the photo, we might think, well, that was an utter failure. This is just overexposed. It looks terrible. With raw files in particular, please don't make this assumption. As a rule, we need to develop all raw files, and certain raw files will almost always look not so great when we first bring them in. That's because they're holding a lot of information that needs to be processed. So let's take a look at this one. The first thing I want to do actually is to just zoom in and see whether or not this is in nice focus. These are these snow geese. I know they look kind of overexposed and a little bit too contrasty, but let's just check to see if they're worth playing with. So first of all, I zoom in and I go, oh yeah, this is good. I really nailed the focus on this one. This central bird is super sharp focus. I can see his eye and his beak and the texture of his feathers. So I really want to actually do something with this. The next thing I'm going to check is the histogram, and this histogram is absolutely beautiful. So remember, with the histogram, blacks, shadows, midtones, highlights, and whites. And you can see that none of this goes absolutely to white, or just the tiniest little bit of it maybe in the yellows. Everything else is right in these high highlights, which is where it should be, with a little thin line of what is likely the wingtips that are going down to the shadows. This is a really good file. Now, I know reading histograms is probably a very new experience to you, and if that didn't make sense, don't stress too much. When I get into the development, you'll see what happens. Okay, definitely want to crop this a little bit, and I'm going to do a free crop. I'm going to bring it in here, and in this one, I'm going to bring down the top and the bottom. I'm kind of pushing to the limits of what I might want to do with the crop. I'm taking about 30% out, but because I know the geese are in nice sharp focus, I can get away with that, and that looks good. Definitely brings them more into the foreground. Now, we want to start playing with our basic panel here all the way down through saturation. We're not going to go farther than that for right now. The white balance actually looks pretty good. If you wanted to double check it, you could, although there's kind of tricky to find a neutral gray area. We could try clicking here. Well, actually, that's a little bit nicer. I'm going to go ahead and go with that. Makes the geese a little bit whiter, makes the sky a tiny bit bluer. Okay, so let's zoom in while we do the rest of this development, because I just want you to see what happens. Definitely the exposure looks a little high. We're going to bring it down, just see what we can bring back. Oh, and that is super nice. Notice how a lot of those textures and details are coming back. Now, I'm going to skip over the contrast. You might be tempted, because this is a contrasty scene, to just lower the contrast. But I found that this is sort of a heavy-handed way to control the relationship of tonal values. I mostly leave this adjustment alone, and many of the photographers I know do also. Instead, I like to play with these four. These actually allow me to control different areas of this tonal range. Notice I'm going up to the top to the histogram. I can control the black. See how the black lights up? The shadows light up. This is exposure. The exposure just deals with this mid-range, highlights, and whites. So these are controlling all these different areas. I'm going to bring, if we look at this area, I'm going to bring the highlights down. And I'll do this slowly just so you can see that as I do that, look at how I get a lot more texture, especially in that midsection of the wing. It's not changing the shadows or the midtones much. It's just actually bringing a little more texture in here. The other thing I want to do is to actually bring the shadows up just a little bit, and see how it's adding a little texture there. Now, I'm going to take them down again, because I actually want to navigate to an area where there are more shadows so you can see this a little more dramatically. And see how that just adds that texture detail. Even in here, it's adding just a little bit, a hint of detail, and here, an awful lot of detail. The whites and the blacks, I'm not going to do anything with on this image because the brightest whites and the darkest blacks are right where I want them to be. So I'm going to leave them there. But I am definitely going to do some texture. So I almost always do a little bit of texture when I'm doing birds because it really emphasizes the feathers. You don't want to get carried away. You can see how it can get kind of a little too crazy. Just a tiny bit. The clarity, remember, is going to up the contrast in the midtones, so a little bit of that is nice. And in this case, the dehaze, we're going to use this in two different ways. In this one, I'm going to add a tiny bit of haze. I prefer this to lowering contrast. Now it could get really gross really quickly. By the way, if you want to go to 0 on this, you just click it, double click, it goes back to 0. If I take this just a little bit to the left, you can see how it just softens it up. I don't even want to do just 9 points is all I want to do. Okay, and that's where we are. A little tiny bit of vibrance. Now, remember that in Lightroom, everything is non-destructive. So I haven't done anything permanent to the file itself. I've just added a list of instructions for these particular adjustments. If I look at the history, all of those adjustments are here. I can go right back to the beginning, to the very first changes that I made, and on up through. I could stop at any of these, but that would leave it there, and on up through the end. And so I can actually keep these, I can delete them, I can change any of them at any time. But at this point, I'm going to leave it right like this. I like that development. Now, I want to go on and look at a very different image that has sort of an opposite set of issues that we want to develop, and also show you yet another technique that adds to the non-destructive process. So let's go back to library, and let's pick this photo. So you can see this is a photo I took recently on a very, very foggy day. And I was really intrigued with the way the branches looked coming through there. But of course, on a super foggy day like this, you end up with something that looks pretty mushy and without much detail. But again, you might assume, if you're a beginning photographer, that this was just an epic fail. That the camera can't capture this, or you're just not good enough, or you don't have a good enough camera, or whatever. But that's not actually true. This is actually a very good capture. It has lots of information, and I'm going to show you a little bit about how to work with it. Now, first, though, in order to do this, I'm actually going to do a little magic trick, which is I'm going to create a virtual copy. So I now have 2 copies of the same file. But if I back out, let's go back to library, you'll see that the second one actually has this little tab, and that means it's a virtual copy. It's not adding any space. It's not, it hasn't made a copy that will show up in a folder. It just has a virtual copy that we can work on and do a separate set of instructions. The first one will stay original. The second one will have the development show up, and we can move from there, we can print from there, we can do anything we want with that file, export it, but it will, we can also go back and look at the original. Okay, let's go on in here and let's see what to do. So first of all, do our check. If I zoom in, I know it's a little tricky because it's awfully foggy, but we can see that this is actually nicely focused. So the next thing we look at is the histogram, and the histogram is actually quite spectacular. It's over in the highlight area, not up into the whites. So lots and lots of information that all we need to be able to do is tease it apart. Because you can see right now, all of the tones are sort of clumped up in this little cone, but we can actually move those around. So the first thing, I'm going to skip over the white balance for now because I'm not sure where I want to end up with this. I'm not going to crop it. I'm going to leave the whole thing. I like everything in here. I can experiment a little bit just with taking the exposure down. Now that's taking everything down. I could also experiment a little bit with contrast, but honestly, the contrast isn't doing much. It's just bringing it up. So instead, I want to come down into my tonal range and into some of these more sophisticated tools. So highlights and shadows, we're already in highlights and shadows. If we bring highlights up and down, you can see it's not doing a whole heck of a lot. I'm going to go ahead and bring them up a little bit just so I can bring those brighter areas up. Same thing with shadows. Because these are all pretty much clumped together, it's not making a whole lot of difference. We really need to be able to play a little bit more with pulling the very brightest areas up and the very darkest areas down. And you see how when we do that, it starts to pull that histogram apart. And we can experiment with this. You want to go sort of slowly, back off, see what you can pick up. Let's zoom in again, because once we start pulling things apart, sometimes they sort of start coming apart, but that's actually looking pretty good. Definitely have a lot more detail, but we can go further. Okay, let's go down into texture, clarity, and dehaze. And I'm going to skip past these two. We might come back to them. And usually I go in order, but with this image, I know that what I really need to do is dehaze. Now I could go really far with the dehaze. I don't want to go all the way, but you can see what the possibilities are. It gradually sort of lifts that fog. It's really kind of a magical tool. I don't want to lift all of the fog. I'm just going to lift a little bit. And I'm also going to double check, because with the dehaze comes a bit of noise. So you don't want to get too carried away with that. I'll also up the vibrance just a hair. Oh yeah, I'm liking this a lot. And I can then, once I do that, I can bring the blacks down just a little bit more. And now I'm going to go in and go ahead and play with my white balance. Oh yeah, I like that that warms it up a bit, maybe not quite that far. It creates a nice warmth to it. I'm also going to go back, pull my whites up a little bit more, and my blacks down a little bit more. And you can see we're starting to really see this image come to life. Let me just go ahead and show you. Here's where we started. And here's where we are. Very different photo.